Welcome to the 3A's podcast, Ancestral Health, Austrian Economics, and Awareness Mindfulness, the 3A's. And welcome to the 3A's podcast, Episode 2. Today's guest is Lloyd Burnett of Train and Sustain and also author of Craving The Perfect Body. Lloyd and I had a great conversation. So if you want to know how a personal trainer can instill awareness, mindfulness training into their practice, this is the podcast for you. Well, before we get started, I'd like to call your attention to the 3As.com. Please consider stopping by. We've got some great content to come. Please sign up for our newsletter. It's going to come out once a month, towards the end of the month. We've got some awesome news that is just going to go out to our newsletter subscribers. It's going to be about some new sponsors that will start taking part in this show, some very interesting products that will dovetail very nicely with the three things that we concentrate on here: awareness, Austrian economics, and ancestral health. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Lloyd Burnett. Okay, welcome to the 3A's podcast. That's Ancestral Austrian Awareness. And on the phone and on the video tonight, we have Lloyd Burnett of Train and Sustain. How you doing, Lloyd?
I am doing very well today. Thank you for having me.
Well, I didn't actually get to meet Lloyd until just in this video interview, but I did get to walk by his poster board at the Ancestral Health Symposium 2013 in his lovely, awesome city of Atlanta, Georgia. Can you tell us a little bit more about your presentation at the AHS 13?
Yes. My presentation, it's actually interesting because my presentation almost didn't happen because at the last minute, right when I was setting up my poster board, I actually decided not to do the presentation. And this was for various reasons because I had spent 2 days going around to the other presentations and lectures and workshops, and I noticed that everything that everybody was doing was really hardcore science. Like, this is the data, we worked with X amount of people, this is what happened, and I was just like, okay, wow, my presentation really is the softer side of everything, and I got a bit nervous, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't do this presentation. Maybe it just doesn't fit in here. Maybe they're not ready for it. And then I actually went to a lecture by Dr. Selhub, and it was a beautiful lecture that kind of mixed the stress response with which most people understand scientifically with something else that wasn't scientific at all, something that she called the love response. And after we did a couple meditations in her lecture, I was like, okay, so my presentation, which was on bridging the gap between nutrition science and intuition, my presentation actually has a place in this movement, a very important place. And so I ended up going to get my poster, I put it back up, and I stood up there and had a great time telling people about the other side of all of the hard scientific facts. I noticed that in many lectures that they would say, the presenter would say, okay, we found that people have to eat this way or they have to do this way. So we had them do it, and we had a compliance rate of 2%. And I'm like, okay, what's going on with that 2%? So that's basically what my work is. It's trying to find out exactly what works for the individual based on nutritional studies that are turned into dietary recommendations. So it's tailoring it to the person so that compliance level goes up a bit more.
Yeah, and I think that you can already tell why I was gravitated towards contacting you, somebody who just right at the beginning mentioned the importance of getting into the correct mindset, the meditation sessions that you had, overcoming some of that emotional eating that probably many of your clients have, the regression to certain thoughts and overcoming those. Before we get started, and how you got to this practice, have you always been training and eating healthy?
No, actually. I have been involved in exercise for a long time, but I haven't focused. I didn't really focus on nutrition, and I definitely didn't focus on mindfulness for my entire life. And I was actually probably about 10 years ago, I was about 50 pounds heavier, and I had really bad asthma, really bad allergies, and I was on like 7 different medications. And at one point when I moved after I graduated from Dartmouth, I moved over to Spain, and I noticed that everybody was a lot smaller than me. And so I was like, all right, I need to get into shape. And the only way I knew to do it was to exercise really hard, which I kind of had a background in, so I knew how to do that. And the nutrition part I didn't know too well, so I put myself on what I thought, everybody does when they lose weight is a restriction diet where I just ate tomatoes and cucumbers for months and months and months, and I dropped a ton of weight, but my health deteriorated. My asthma got horrible. My allergies were, I was incessantly sneezing, and I actually ended up in the hospital one weekend, hospitalized twice in the same weekend for an asthma attack. And that's when I realized, okay, something's going on here. You were overweight before, you lost the weight, and maybe you didn't lose it in the safest way. Let's figure out what's going on and find out a plan that works for you.
Yes, and when I had similar story where I was on 3 or 4 different medications before changing my nutritional approach, and the torture that I was doing when I was working out, because I thought that you had to suffer both nutritionally and physically to lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
And that freedom that you feel that you don't have to suffer, and you don't have to mask these symptoms with drugs. I'm not a doctor, of course. I'm not saying that there isn't a medical intervention need when it's appropriate, but what was that freedom that you felt when you kind of figured out that these regular prescriptions and just eating cucumbers wasn't going to do it for you?
I'll tell you, first of all, it was a long process for me to find that freedom. But when I found that freedom, for me, it looked like going a week without taking my asthma medication.
Right.
And after struggling for that week, and then after 7 days, I took my first deep breath that was on my own without any medication. It was like, I think I found something.
Wow.
I think I found what works for me, So it was very liberating because I was actually able to breathe.
Yeah, that's great. And how do you take that experience? Because everybody comes to this moment of change differently. How do you share that story and share that understanding with some of the clients, probably many of your clients that are coming to you haven't made these changes in their life? What's your approach?
My approach is a lot different than most professionals in the fitness and in the well-being industry. I try to guide people to understand that if they're not ready right now, they're not ready right now. If they are ready right now, they are ready right now. And great. Both are great. You have to approach both of them very compassionately, because if they're not ready and they're trying to do it and they're forcing themselves and they're struggling, they're going to beat themselves up and go further, in the direction that they don't want to go. So I try to focus it with a lot of compassion. And, there's that moment where everybody has when they change, where it's like, okay, I'm going to do this now.
Right.
And until that person has that moment, then nothing really happens. They try fad diets and, they have a little bit of results, but they most likely get tired of it or can't follow the diet anymore and go back to where they started. It's like 90% of people who lose weight on diets, they gain it back within a year or two, and I think that statistic is so high because, sometimes people just aren't ready. And so when they aren't ready, what I do is my training in mindful awareness helps people become ready. It helps people actually sit in their body, be in their body, feel what's going on. And when they feel the true discomfort of disease, of being overweight, something clicks and it's like, oh my God, I'm ready. And you can see it in their eyes. I mean, I can tell when the person's ready. When they're finally ready, the weight just drops off, But the majority of people who come to me, they say they're ready, but they're not.
Well, that's such a different vision than some of the mainstream media of what a personal trainer's approach is going to be. The sort of lack of compassion, the drill instructor like prime time shows that we see about losing weight, and certainly the the combination of all of those things about nutrition and exercise, but actually just pausing for a moment and being in the now and being aware. That is something you don't see from that many personal trainers. Was this something that you figured out as you were developing your practice, or did you develop your practice with this offering already in place?
I figured it out while I was trying to figure out my own life, to tell you the truth, and then I based my practice on what I found on my own personal journey. When I had my moment where it was like, okay, it's time for something different. I have to figure out what works for me. What I did was I studied, all of the exercise, nutrition, spirituality, self-help books that I could find. I went to workshops on, energy, on Reiki, on biorhythms, and anything that I can get my hands on. And everybody was always like, Lloyd, this is absolute nuts. Like, you're going to drive yourself crazy. You can't find what works for you by doing 10 million things. And I was like, well, I think I'm on the right path, And so I did 10 million things. And the funny thing is that I realized that everything led me back to me. It led me back to my present moment. It led me back to my body. It led me back to listening. And it showed me that my body is an absolutely magnificent machine that communicates with me in every single moment of the day. And it changes all the time when it wants. And so that's one of the main reasons why before in the past, when I was actually struggling with weight, I could hardly, I couldn't achieve any of my goals, or I would, and then I would go back, and then I'd achieve a little bit more, lose a couple more pounds, and then go back. And it's because, my body changes every single day. It needs different things. It's a very dynamic organism,
Yes, and the part about being in the now and figuring that part out, where all of these different lessons and approaches led you back to yourself, and then there was finally that's maybe similar to other people's experiences too. And one of the experiences is partly why I'm doing this show, is people that might be really locked into physical fitness, really locked into Austrian economics or whatever type of philosophical study they may have. Seem to have a halo effect where they think they know a lot about everything. And boy, that was me. And then when I figured out that, I'm really healthy now and really kind of know what's going on in the world, but there's something that's missing. And I fell for the trap, and I still don't understand it all. And I'm trying to reserve judgment not only on others but myself. But there's many times where I lose that present awareness and that mindfulness. And I think a lot of people that are unhealthy, it's sometimes just as easy to quit a healthy approach to eating or working out as it is to lose that present moment. How is the struggle to not only keep in that mindful awareness and use that as a tool, something that's not going to be there 365 days and 7 days, but to forgive yourself when you are first starting out, especially, of regressing back to past and future concentration, or for that matter, just coming to the gym once a week and saying, "Oh, this is it. This doesn't work." I mean, how do you bridge some of those gaps?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And what I usually do with my clients is that when we first start, I tell them honestly that, I'm not trying to lead you to the promised land where you will be present in every single moment of the day, and you will be healthy for the rest of your life, and you will achieve this body, and guess what? As soon as you achieve it, that's it. You're done with all your work.
Right.
I tell them from the beginning that's not the way it is. There's a natural ebb and flow to life, and it's impossible to be present every single moment of the day. Right. It's impossible to stay the same weight every single minute of the day. There's going to be fluctuations, So,
yes.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think that is such a great example, and I wish in some ways when I was first starting out on paleo that I had understood awareness a little bit more, and that they were more coupled together.
Mhm.
So has the adoption rate of the people that, as you said, were ready to make changes. You saw that it was better facilitated by adding this into your practice then.
Oh, yes, definitely, definitely. Because when they were ready to make the changes, they made the changes, but that readiness only lasts for so long, and then something else takes its place. And so you have to be willing to understand what is coming in to take its place and to greet it with a smile. If laziness takes the place of readiness, you say, "Come on in, laziness, you're here." And the more you greet it with a smile, the more you have compassion for however you feel, the less attached you are to that new feeling that comes in. So that means that laziness will come through you, it'll flow like a wave, and it'll go back. It'll recede, and something else will take its place. Maybe it's motivation.
Yes. Well, you in your practice train and sustain, and I'm going to bring it up for the screen for people to check it out. Great homepage. Free audio training programs. You got a lot of great content on here. And one of the things that I was perusing was the Craving the Perfect Body, which is not just one CD or one video. It seems like it's a whole system. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yes, that's actually my new system that I have out right now. I just started promoting it last week, actually. And what it is, it's a complete system to approach your cravings. I know a lot of people out there in my practice, and I'm sure a lot of people out there in the world are struggling with the idea of, okay, I'm starting this new diet, but week 2, I have these crazy cravings for everything that's not part of the diet. And so that tends to, people either do one of, 3 things. They try to suppress their cravings with brute force, and, that doesn't work. It always comes back. Or they try to ignore it, and if they try to ignore it, they'll start to see, those sweets or commercials for, chocolate fudge sundaes all over the place, or they try to run from it, and you just can't outrun it. It comes back stronger and stronger. And when it does actually come back and overtake you and you indulge, people tend to just binge and fall off the proverbial bandwagon, And so when they fall off the bandwagon, it's like, okay, we're done, I screwed up here, and all the judgment comes in, and they beat themselves up so much for falling off the bandwagon that, what is the one thing that people turn to the most when they're beaten up, when they're sad, when they're judged? They turn to food for comfort. And so what happens is that starts to falling off the bandwagon because you didn't you didn't address your cravings in a fashion that promoted that didn't promote struggle. That leads to the cycle starting again, where you have to binge on these foods to lift yourself up. You crave the ice cream because it has a lot of sugar, because you're sad and you need energy, and so you start the cycle again. So what I did was I put together this system that it consists of an ebook that explains there's 5 steps. It's 5 steps to use your cravings to lose weight and to get happy and to feel sexy. Not to dissolve them, not to suppress them, not to ignore them or run away from them, to actually use them, because it's something that we all have, and if we use them, they can actually lead us to achieving all of our goals. And then it also has a rescue CD for people to use in the moment when they're like, oh my God, I have a craving for a brownie right now. What do I do? So you pop in the CD. And it also has a worksheet. And everything, the 5 steps, they basically revolve around the information of your cravings. Your cravings are your body telling you something. And the more you try to run from them, suppress them, or ignore them, the bigger the cravings will get, because guess what? Your body has a message for you. And until you listen, it's going to be like a nagging child. It's going to be like, hey, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And until it gets its moment to say what it wants, it's going to keep on coming back. So it's a system to help people tap into the communication of their cravings, learn from it, and achieve all of their health and weight goals.
Oh, yes. And when I have those cravings, going back to our mindfulness, I am not there. It is as if a automated computer program is just carrying out its function. I don't know where I'm at. And, well, I actually, when you do step back and after all of the carnage, there was something that led you to that, a worry, an anxiousness, something about the future, something about when you were 9 years old and got your hair pulled for a little girl across the street. I hate to admit that, but that's probably maybe something like that still in my head. But yeah, they're not there in the present moment, even understanding what they're doing. They're somewhere else. Has that been a common theme in working with your clients?
Of course, of course. The thing is with this system, it helps people start to be there in the middle of the cravings. It helps people to start to experience the craving and be in their body and open up to the information. And it doesn't mean that you're never going to have those cravings where you just described where you go on autopilot. I still have those cravings, But what happens is that either there's space added before I indulge in the craving, or if it's that autopilot one, there is no space, but there's space added afterwards where I can sit and I can do that evaluation. And instead of judging myself for indulging in the craving, I greet myself with a smile and with compassion by using these steps, and my body opens up to tell me what was going on. Was it that little girl across the street that pulled my hair or whatever? But I mean, it's like a child. If you greet a child with, you're so stupid, how could you do such a thing? They're going to close up like a clam and not talk to you or tell you anything. But if you treat a child with, I love you, what's going on? What happened here? Whatever happened is absolutely fine. Let's just talk. That's when they're going to open up and be like, hey, this is what happened to me, and this is what we need to release, or this is what needs to be fixed, or this is what I need to feel safe.
That makes so much sense. And also when you, again, in the aftermath of all of that, there's shame involved. There is, like you said, a closed being that doesn't want to admit what they did. There's someone who really can't forgive themselves. Whether it's a late night binge or not going to the gym for a couple of weeks, it then turns into 3 or 4 weeks. It's, there's so many parallels with people wanting to get up. Maybe when they first work with you, I'm going to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning every day, 7 days a week, and I'm going to be there. And they might make it to the 3rd day, and then all of that shame. So how do you approach people, given what you just said, and teaching them how to forgive themselves, bootstrap themselves back up, and just continue on and keep looking forward on one hand, but, as we said, that mindfulness?
Well, it's a process that I use. It's not easy to convince someone who, for their entire life, they haven't forgiven themselves, and people around them haven't been as easy to forgive them either. So they've been trained to hold on to things and to treat themselves with judgment and continue to live in this pain and suffering. So that's what they've been trained to do. So it's not easy for someone to come through my door and I'm like, my magic wand, and here, you can forgive yourself now. So what I do is I use a process. I use something called in-process affirmations that I learned from a very wonderful psychotherapist out of Florida. And what it basically is if you tell somebody to forgive themselves and they'll say, okay, I forgive myself, I love myself, they typically don't believe that in the beginning. And so you start the process and you meet them where they are. You say, okay, how about I am willing to consider forgiving myself for indulging in, the brownies. And that may fit somebody. They're like, okay, I am willing to consider it, but I don't do it, but I'm willing. And so you go from I'm willing to consider forgiving myself to I'm willing to forgive myself at some point to I forgive myself to I am forgiveness. And so you greet that person wherever they are. And wherever they are, I work with what they give me. And as we work together, that in-process affirmation begins to shift, and it begins to go further and further and further. And sometimes it'll regress and go back. But wherever they are, it's absolutely fine. Because you know what? You don't have to forgive yourself. It's absolutely fine if you don't forgive yourself. And people look at me like I'm crazy when I'm like, great, you're beating yourself up, you're judging yourself. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. They expect me to meet that with, oh, you got to stop, you got to do this, you got to do X, Y, Z. But no, I'm like, absolutely wonderful. Now let's talk about it. Let's see what's going on. Let's look at it. How's it feel?
Right. Yeah, I mean, whether it be the Socratic method, or just having the chance to be asked why you're doing it, rather than be told not to do it, is a completely different paradigm of discussion that I'm willing to have, no matter what the subject may be. Well, Lloyd, you're based out of Atlanta. It was my first time really getting a good taste of it. I'd been there a long time ago for a U2 concert back in the 90s, I think.
Oh, nice.
That was the last time I'd been there, and it was great. I had such a fun time. And your business is located out of Atlanta, correct?
Correct.
And
yes.
if people want to find you, they can find you at trainandsustain.com. Is there any other way that people can get a hold of you and contact you if they wanted to work with
yes.
you, not only for your content that's online, which is awesome. I encourage people to check it out, but this new Craving the Perfect Body system, there's some videos here. Any other things that you could pass on?
Yes. So the majority of my work is actually online. I do a lot of coaching online and products online. And really soon I'll be doing another coaching program it's a joint venture with the psychotherapist that I was telling you about out of Florida, where we do online coaching in a program called Go Deeper, Get Lighter. And it's all about diving deep into the issues of why we're heavy. And it could be physical weight, it could be spiritual weight, it could be emotional weight. It's diving into those issues and identifying them, acknowledging them, and deciding if we want to release them and be lighter. So another way of finding me and working with me is godeepergetlighter.com, and that's the program that I work with Carrie Nola out of Florida. So we work together on that. So yeah, and I have a YouTube channel and Twitter. My handle's at Train and Sustain, and also Facebook is facebook.com/Train and Sustain.
Great. So the Twitter, Facebook, they go deep and go light, right?
Go deeper, get lighter.
Get lighter, Train and Sustain. All of those links we'll put in the show notes. Just one quick question as we come to the end of the interview. I was talking to our previous guest about the absolute bubble, and a positive bubble that you experience when you're at one of these Ancestral Health Symposiums, and you just have this wonderful ability to just speak uninhibited on any subject. How was that for you? Was that kind of almost weird when you walked away from it? Then you go back into the world, and there's not everyone there is really practicing mindfulness or adherence or just starting out with it. So there's definitely, I was impressed by this year that they had folks such as you and some others that incorporated this. But nonetheless, the ability to just for 3 days nonstop share ideas. How was that, and how was your information received?
It was received really well, and the whole feel to the conference. It was my first one, and I absolutely loved it. I love the fact that I can say, oh, I'm going to go have a glass of kombucha real quick, and people don't look at me like I'm crazy. Like, what the heck is that? So it was great to be around people who are like-minded, or are interested in the same things, and are connected to health, fitness, and awareness, and at first, with my presentation, I was afraid that it wasn't going to be received very well at all. But once I was able to jump out of my fear and actually present the information that I knew was necessary, that my voice was necessary to be there, it went really well. And I couldn't believe, the funny thing is I had Mark Sisson right behind me signing books during my poster presentation. And he was seriously 3 feet behind me. And I still had a huge group of people in front of my poster listening to me. And I'm like, that's when you know when you made it. When you have Mark Sisson right behind you signing books and the people still come and listen to you speak.
Yeah, that guy's a humble dude, but very, very wise and knowledgeable. Just so many of the,
oh, yes.
whether they're thought leaders or entrepreneurs and guides and coaches, personal trainers such as yourself, just folks coming in bare feet, walking in with Vibrams, just such a great atmosphere. And I think for the most part, people leave their ego at the door. It was a wonderful time. I really enjoyed your city. I'd love to come down there and do a training session with you. I'm on my initial steps of becoming more mindful and becoming more aware, and it's just incorporating it with other facets of my life. It's just great, and keep up the great work and synthesizing all of these different services that you're offering. It's helping a lot of people. I learned a lot just on today's show, and I look forward to checking more of your videos out. And please visit Lloyd Burnett's sites. I'll go ahead and put them on the show notes. And thank you very much, Lloyd. This was a great discussion.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
And that's a wrap for episode 2 of the 3A's podcast, where ancestral health, Austrian economics, and awareness mindfulness are discussed. Please do check out the3As.com, sign up for the newsletter. See you next time.